I'm your host, U.S. Army retired Colonel and veteran combat medic, Dr. Damon Arnold. And I have a panelist who's a special panelist. He actually is someone that I met previously, and he's our partner, Steve Bramer. He's a U.S. Army Iraq Purple Heart recipient, veteran, and chapter service officer member of Hammond DAV Chapter 17. And he's also a brother from another mother.
Ah!
But he is one phenomenal person that you all should know. Uh, he has gone through some trials and tribulations and has succeeded beyond expectations, um, even of a combat uh, role veteran. He is really tried by fire and came out as golden as you can be. So, how are you doing,
Thank
Steve?
you. That was awesome. I love that intro.
So, we have the Hammond DAV Chapter 17 updates. And tell us what's going on, Steve. What's going on in your part of the world?
So we just had an event called the DAV Walk,
Uh,
where it's just some of the events that we have, they don't make a lot of money, but what they do is they give a lot of exposure out there to veterans to see that there's organizations out there that want to help them. And getting the name out there and getting the information out there is kind of the important thing. Like your show is so important for that, because a lot of veterans don't know what's out there. The government is a very complicated thing sometimes, so sometimes you need help, and there's organizations out there like the DAV that are willing to help.
yes.
Oh, so yeah, we had our DAV walk, and it went really good. It was in Cherville in front of the police station,
Yeah.
and they have a war memorial there where they have soldiers from Vietnam. They have soldiers from World War II, and they have their faces on plaques. And
Wow.
then so
Wow.
we had a ceremony there, and then just a little tribute to them afterwards.
That is so phenomenal. And one of the encouraging things that you know, I remember we moved away from saying that people were irre, you know irretrievably disabled to enabled. So what are your abilities? And I was looking at the Olympics, and then I watched the Paralympics, and I was like, these people will kick my butt if I was out
Yeah.
there trying to compete with them. So we have to really reevaluate our views of what a disabled person is able to do. Of course, they need to have care. They need to have the resources made available to them, and they need to be covered by the VA, for their disability. But we also need to give them an avenue or a window to walk through so that they can do and express themselves, all their talents, their abilities, their skills. They didn't join the military without those things,
Yeah.
and those things are still with them. So, what are some of the things that that the DAV does to make sure that veterans are, looking at life in a better way?
So one thing that I think the DAV is really good about is, they recognize that not every veteran can be put in a specific group. Like, we're not all just soldiers that got blown up. There are a lot of disabilities out there. You could look for World War II. There were a lot of amputations, a lot of shell shock, what they called PTSD back in the day.
Mhm.
Vietnam had a lot of the Agent Orange, a lot of cancers. My generation, we have a lot of PTSD from the Iraq War, a lot of migraines, traumatic brain injury. So and that's just the wars. I when I talk to a veteran, I tell them that it doesn't matter if you were in combat or not. Just being in the military could be traumatic. There's guys that have gotten into accidents on basic training, falling from a wall, or they were doing a controlled blast and somebody got too close. There's a lot of instances where the military can just be inherently dangerous, just the training alone. So the DAV recognizes that, and we help everybody. Whether it was peacetime veteran, whether it was a National Guardsman, we help every veteran, and I think that's kind of the key to it. because a lot of I'll give you an example. So when we file a claim and we have them go to an exam at the VA, we would ask a vet, who do you think is better at rating you, a fellow veteran
Mhm.
or a civilian? And first thing they would say is a veteran.
Mhm.
And we're like, well, yeah, but that veteran's also been through their own experiences.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's better to have a civilian who's outside the purview of the military and can get, objectively rate you. And that's kind of the part about it. You just want to be able to inform these guys on what's out there and how you can't just tell them that there's a benefit out there. You got to help them in trying to acquire it as well, because that's the hard part is when you try to get the benefits. There's a lot of
Yeah.
red tape, a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, yeah. And and what do you think is needed? I mean, because what do families need to know about this? Because many times you have veterans who sort of isolate themselves or don't want to be involved or engage with the system as per
Yeah,
se, but their family members know that they're in trouble. They have PTSD. We know we have the burn pits now with the PAC Act, and people are going through some mental health and physical health issues that maybe are important for
yeah.
that to be recognized. And so, what is it that, we as veterans can do for other veterans, and what do family members need to know about that veteran and then that, how to help them or assist them?
Well, I think a family can really help in helping a veteran to identify that they have an issue. A lot of times we come back from the military and you hurt your knee. It hurts a lot when you walk. You can barely work on it, but life doesn't stop. You have to still pay the bills. So what do? You just limp along and you work the best you can. And what happens is a lot of these veterans they get used to it and they learn how to live with it. And the family could really help in telling them, maybe you should go in, maybe you should get checked for that, maybe you should get rated for that.
Mhm.
I feel like the family is the key with the suicide awareness, to be honest with you, because a lot of
Mhm.
times the family member is the first line of defense. They're the ones that see the veteran on a daily basis and can
Mhm.
identify, if there's a change in the veteran's demeanor, if they're isolating themselves, and it's not easy. If you approach, say I have a brother and I approach him and I say, man, I think you're starting to suffer from some things. Maybe you should go in. You're going to get pushback.
Mhm.
But if just talk to them and make it known to them, it could be, how do you say, it's kind of planting that seed in their head that, man, maybe I should. I didn't know I had PTSD when I first went.
Mhm.
They put that criteria in front of me. I was like, oh, that's what I have. And that was my first time going to the VA. Was after that. I did. You don't even know. You don't even think about it sometimes. So having somebody to show you that or tell you that, it can help a lot sometimes.
Yeah, because if you have a a artillery gun go off next to you, and then you just brush off the dust and say, "Oh, it's just the dust from the gun,"
Yeah,
you're dealing with an unusual situation there, and we have a
yeah,
tendency to sort of brush things off and say, "Oh, that was just a little bit of a thing," and not really understand that this is really impacting us, physically and mentally. And as you were mentioning before, the TBI issues, with improvised explosive devices and rocket propelled grenades, and all those things that were definitely impacting people who are in the combat zone on a daily basis.
yeah,
Um, and then also seeing other members of the military lose their lives, the Gold Star family, veterans that served the country and gave their lives, and you are sitting there watching this happen. It can have a devastating impact, especially if you know them or you worked with them, and you met them on a daily basis, and you were part of the unit for some time. So
Yeah.
those things are, really something that people really have to understand the psychological impact of that. And then we have people who are doing multiple tours, doing 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, five. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. I don't think any other war people served as many tours of duty.
Yeah.
Mm.
No. You didn't have guys going back to Vietnam 3 or 4 or 5 times. It's
Right.
and I think part of it was that's part of the PTSD. You come back and they have a hard time adapting to becoming a civilian again. So, instead of figuring out how to work that together and figure out how to make it work, they just decide to go back. And then next thing you know, doing another tour and another tour. And, it's sad because traumatic brain injury has probably always been there. I mean, I guarantee you they had it in Vietnam and World War II. It's just they are barely now accepting that. And when you think about what traumatic brain injury is it's basically just your brain inside your skull. And then when you have a concussion or you hit your head, it shakes inside the skull, and that's what bruises it.
Yeah.
And that could be, I mean, you can hit your head on a bunk and get TBI. I mean, it's got to be
Yeah.
hard, but you could still do it. So I think people identifying that now helps. Same thing with suicide awareness. I
Yes.
think, I think it's always been there. It's just people are finally seeing it
Yeah.
now and
Calling it
addressing
for
it.
what it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's a profound statement too, and an insight. That we have been dealing and living with these things throughout all of the wars we've gone through. Whether it's the Korean War or the Civil War or the
Yeah.
Revolutionary War, we've been dealing with combat injuries and the implications for the service members and their families. And so, what website can people go to, or where would you recommend people to, to get involved with the system if they have a disability or are thinking about it?
Well, you got me on the website one. That's a good one. You got me there. But we, our chapter, we have meetings every month, and
Okay.
our chapter
Mhm.
is actually
Mhm.
having our meeting tomorrow night in Hammond.
Ah,
It's at 7 p.m. in Hammond. The address is 5820 Holman Avenue. And we have a veteran service officer from the DAV that works in Chicago. He comes straight from Chicago to go to our meeting to help veterans.
wow.
And that's veterans, we take care of each other. That's what I like. That's why I like it. I like to see that because people go out of their way to help other veterans. And it's because we've been there. And the fact that this guy comes to the meetings on his off time right after work, I mean, he's got a family, but he still makes the time to go to the meetings. And, it shows the dedication that these guys have, you know.
Wow.
Um, but we have a meeting tomorrow night. We have a service officer there. It's at 7 p.m. We also have a website. I want to say it's
Okay.
davin17.com,
Yeah.
but I'm looking it up right now.
Okay.
But yeah, we have the meeting tomorrow night, and yeah, if anybody wants to help with their claim, we'll be there. We also have other meetings throughout the month,
Hmm.
so I probably should have gotten a list for you, but
You're fine.
I apologize for that. I didn't
Well,
think of that one.
you'll be on again. You know that.
Yeah, well, I'll make sure I have it next time.
But maybe you could just mention them. What kind of things you do. Just in general.
Oh yeah. So all the DAV meetings in this area have a service officer that goes there. So there's one in Cedar Lake, Indiana.
Mhm.
There's a meeting in Valparaiso, Indiana, Michigan City, Indiana. Um, then in Illinois, there's one in Addison, Illinois. There's one in I can't think of the name of it right now. Oak Brook, I think it's called.
Mhm.
There's an Oak Brook in Illinois, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So it's Oak Brook in
Mhm.
Illinois, and I know there's one in Chicago too. That one I'm not familiar with too much, but
Yeah.
Chicago's there's a lot of people in Chicago, so it's too big for me. But
Yeah, Yeah, I'm in Tinley Park now. That's like so I understand the feeling. But no, but but one of the things that I was thinking about when you were saying that is how as a veteran and or the family members of veterans, how can we support the DAV, the initiative? I mean, talking to our legislative people, congressmen, local legislators, and saying that this is something that's important to us, that we need to support DAV activities as much as we can. Um,
Oh, you know what? It's supporting veterans overall because when you call your congressman, there are bills out there all
yeah.
the time to help veterans. But
Hmm.
the legislators, they all have their own agenda. So, you have to make sure that you get your voice out and show that the people want this as a priority.
Yeah.
And one of the things in Indiana they're trying to push is Indiana used to have remission of fees for college for disabled vets.
Mm-hmm.
And they did away with it about 10 years ago. And that
Wow.
was a big hit for a lot of veterans. So that's one thing they've been pushing for in Indiana. I know nationally there was a case that was trying to be brought back, or they were trying to bring a case to the Supreme Court where a Army major, I think it was Army major, had back surgery on the military, and they messed up on the surgery, and now he's
Mm.
paralyzed from the chest down.
Wow.
The problem is he can't sue the military. So that case that's they're trying to get before the Supreme Court is to eliminate that law where we cannot sue the military for malpractice.
Ah.
So when you call your
Wow.
congressman, I mean, those are things that you can tell them to help us in the long run. It's the Vietnam vets did a really good job of getting us where we're at, but this
Mhm.
new generation, we got to step up and keep it going because it's kind of like that saying, it's hard to get something, but it's even harder to keep it.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
we got to stay on top of it.
Yeah, that's really an important point, extremely important point, because my background's I'm an internist, internal medicine, and then also an occupational environmental medicine, occupational health and safety physician as well. And one of the things I do know is that when you were mentioning Agent Orange, there's a thing called a latency period. So if you get exposed to asbestos, you get exposed to tobacco smoke, right? You can develop lung cancer and mesothelioma, those kinds of things. But with the burn pits, we still haven't seen the total unfolding of what's going on with those in the
Yeah,
service members who were in OIF, OEF, right?
yeah,
Operation Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom. And we haven't seen even the results of those things, those exposures in people who were in the Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm and Operation uh, Desert Storm and Desert Shield at that point in time. So we really need to be more and more involved in this as things unfold, because as they unfold, we need to have the legislation in place to make sure those things are addressed appropriately. And the Vietnam veterans had to wait decades. I mean, many of them, actually passed away before these things actually came into fruition for them and their families.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
So
you're completely right. I mean, it
mhm,
is the VA does a lot of studies. The military does a lot of studies. I mean,
mhm,
the Agent Orange study was like 10 years.
mhm,
What was it? Camp Lejeune, contaminated water. I think
mhm,
they studied that for like 29 years. So they study it. But so from what I understand is what they do is they have these different registries like the burn pit.
mhm,
And what they do is they track you as you're going. So if one guy gets nodules in his lungs, then they look at that category and then they see who else also has gotten nodules in their lungs.
mhm,
Or, for me, for example, before I went to Iraq, I never really had any skin conditions.
mhm,
But ever since I've been back, I get this rash like on the palm of my hand.
oh,
And I don't know where it comes from. It just comes. And, it's places that you would never, I've had a rash on my knee before. And,
wow,
where does that even come from? I've never heard of a rash on a knee before.
yeah,
So
yeah,
who knows where it comes from? And that's the thing, some of this stuff is not explainable
Right.
yet because they don't know.
Right. Yes. 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 You're absolutely right. And those are the things that we need to be paying attention to, and those things need to be reported in the medical files. So, when you go in for your medical evaluation, we need to make sure that those things that we say are appearing in documentation. And it's not just
Yeah,
off the cuff conversation with a physician or a provider in the VA system. They need to be actually documented when we say them, so
yeah,
that they become part of the chart. And then also, one of the things that I think was a shortcoming when we look at overseas deployments was the LODs, line of duty statements. Those were not completed.
yeah,
In
yeah,
any shape or fashion that they should have been for people who are actually contending with upper respiratory tract infections or recurrent sinus infections, those kinds of things, and exposures. So, but what are some of the things that you are hoping for, from the DAV perspective, as far as things that you think, a vision for the future of what you think would be um, something that would be justice for the veterans who are coming back with disabilities. I've seen people in really terrible situations where it was, the one person that always comes back to mind. This brings tears in my eyes every time I think about it. But it's a veteran who lost both of his lower extremities and his right arm. He was a farmer down in Southern Illinois, and his wife is working 3 or 4 jobs to try to keep the family together. And I'm like, this guy, if you're not thinking about suicide prevention, you better be down there talking to him and
yeah.
and working with those situations. But Tammy Duckworth is a very strong individual, but she went through a tremendous loss with when she was being resuscitated after helicopter incident. But so those are the people we need. More people in the legislature, first of all, who are veterans. I'm not going to even start with that one, but
I agree.
we have another show to do on that. Me and you. So
Yeah, right.
but yeah, we have 1 more minute left.
So,
Every time we get together, the time goes like this. We need
man, we could talk for hours. I'm telling you, we could talk for hours. But you
well,
know what? I want to answer your question really quick.
okay, yes.
What I would love to see
Hmm.
is I would love to see the military put a lot of effort into training us to be civilians again when we're ready to get out. Because I feel like that's where a lot of the problems is. They train us to be soldiers, but then they let us loose. And you're finally starting to see it with a lot of veterans or a lot of soldiers when they're coming out. They're now starting to get briefed on disabilities they could have, and they're actually doing claims for these
Hmm.
for these soldiers before they get out. And I think that's huge. I think that's a
Yes.
great step. You know,
Yeah, that sounds absolutely great. I remember when I first got back from Iraq, I had we had this thing where we were like 30 soldiers in a room, and we were just next to each other, like in cheers. And they said, and the sergeant walked in and said, is anyone in here crazy? You have mental health problems? And that was our psychological screening before we went back into
yeah, right.
so I